Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Always a pleasure to bring in the legend. So, Ray Didinger. Ray, always great. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy.
Oh, that's okay, Steve. Always a pleasure to be with you.
All right. So, Eagles through 2 games. What's your feel and assessment through 2 games, even though the season's still in its infancy?
Well, I think the way the first 2 weeks played out, after the really impressive performance in Atlanta the opening week, I think the fairest way of looking at this is, the Eagles are probably better than people thought they were before the Atlanta game, but they're not quite as good as people thought they were after the Atlanta game.
Yeah, right.
I think that because coming into they were so good in Atlanta, they came into the San Francisco game last week, and the preponderance of people in Philadelphia were saying, "Oh yeah, this is no problem. We'll win this game easy." And oh really?
Yeah.
And so that was the expectation, and then you get the big dose of reality in that game, where it was a game they certainly could have won, and they were kind of actually in command of it in the second quarter, but then it got away from them, and so now I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens on Monday night. I think it's let's see how they bounce back from that. I mean, that was really disappointing, and they had a chance to really steal one there. But okay, you lost that game. You're 1-1. You lick your wounds. You'll try and learn some lessons, and then you move on and play your first division game against your biggest rival. So I kind of want to see how they come out and play Monday night.
Exactly. I just want to deviate from the Eagles for a moment. The 49ers were in the Super Bowl and had the lead against Kansas City. Last year they were riddled. They were riddled with injuries last year. I mean, just absolutely just shredded with injuries. What kind of feel did you get for seeing this version of the 49ers with most of those guys back? Oh,
they're good. I mean, they're good. Their offensive line is really good. The tackles are really good. Bosa's a monster of a player. Fred Warner, I think, is a terrific middle linebacker.
Yes.
The biggest issue with them, I think, really is their secondary. I think their secondary was kind of thin to begin with, and losing Verrett really hurt them, because I thought he was their best defensive back. And when they lost him, they lost a lot. I mean, they had to go sign Josh Norman, and they're going to try and get by with him. But that's a problem. Now, the Eagles, with the young quarterback, weren't really able to attack that secondary the way some other teams will be able to. I think that's going to be the problem that the 49ers face down the line here, is teams that can protect and teams that can throw the ball, I think, can make some plays against the secondary. But otherwise, I think that the team is really good, and I think Kyle Shanahan is a really good coach and a really good play caller. And you're quite right, Steve. I mean, what wrecked them last year was injuries, and I fully expect them to be a playoff team. That's a tough division. It's a really tough division, the NFC West, but I fully expect them to be in the playoffs.
In that answer, you referenced Jalen Hurts when you referred to the young quarterback. He's going to make his 7th career start on Monday night. Do you have a sense yet, Ray, not for the athlete or the arm or anything like that, do you have a sense yet as to the kind of feel of the game that Jalen Hurts has?
No, he definitely has that. He definitely has that. I mean, he's and you can almost kind of see that last year, just in practice, just in the way when he got a chance to get in and run things, the way he was very comfortable in doing it. Never looked overwhelmed, never looked like he was in over his head, and a fiercely competitive guy who's kind of understated and not real demonstrative, but commands respect. The veteran players on the team responded to him really well, and he came into a tough situation, after they made the decision to move away from Carson Wentz, and to go to him at that point in what was kind of a crumbling season. It was not the optimum position for a rookie quarterback to step in, but he did, and he came out and he played I mean, he had 4 starts, and they were what you would expect rookie starts to be. There were a couple of them were really good, a couple that weren't so good. But, I mean, he took them all kind of in stride. He didn't get too high with the wins, and he didn't get too crushed by the losses. And there was never much question that this was his team coming into this year. I mean, some people looked at the Joe Flacco signing and said, is that going to be competition? No. I mean, he's just a backup. They trade for Gardner Minshew. Oh, boy, they're bringing him in. There's going to be is Hurts going to be looking over his shoulder? Well, no. I mean, this is Hurts's Steve. This whole season more than anything else with the Eagles really is about Jalen Hurts. This season is really about finding out what he is. I mean, they'll play this year. And at the end of this year, hopefully they will have some determination as to whether he's a guy they can go forward with and win, or if he's not, then they're likely going to be sitting there with 3 first-round draft picks next year that they can go get that other quarterback. But I think this season is really about learning what Jalen Hurts can be, and by the end of the year, one way or another, they have to know that answer.
So 2 games into the season, the way I've got it is that the Eagles' defense has allowed only 2 plays at 20 yards or better, and only one of them's a completion. What are you seeing from this defense so far through 8 quarters?
They seem to be well coached. They are very conscious about not giving up the big play. They don't take a lot of chances. But the problem is they don't take the ball away from anybody.
Right.
I mean, that's the Eagles right now through 2 weeks in the season, and it's just 2 weeks. But you say, well, they haven't turned the ball over. Oh, that's good. Yeah, but they haven't taken the ball away from the other guy. Oh, that's not so good.
Right.
I mean, they're the only team in the league that has a 0, that has a donut in the giveaway takeaway, and you can't live like that defensively in the NFL now. I mean, that's one of the things that really hurt them last year. I mean, there were a lot of things that hurt them last year, but one of the things that hurt them last year was they just didn't take the ball away from anybody. I mean, they finished the year with 8 interceptions, and I don't know. And I kind of thought that putting Steve Nelson at corner opposite Slay would rectify a little bit of that. And they brought Anthony Harris in to play safety, and he's been a ball hawk earlier in his career. But you're not seeing that right now. And I know that Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, I mean, they're not blitzing hardly at all. I mean, they're very, very little. I mean, their blitz ratio is among the lowest in the league. And he may want to think about adjusting that, especially if they don't have Brandon Graham moving forward. He may have to start trying to turn up the heat a little bit, because I think that this team, to win in the NFL right now, defense, you can't. It's become a game of takeaways. Yards yards is almost irrelevant. The good defenses are defenses that take the ball away from the other team, and the Eagles weren't that last year, and they need to be that this year.
Yeah, I think you need takeaways, and if you're not getting takeaways, you have to force field goals.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the game last week. Once the 49ers kind of got their footing, I mean, the first quarter, Garoppolo was really bad, and they didn't have a first down in the first quarter. I mean, they were really off their game. But once they had that series where they held the Eagles at the goal line and then they drove it down the field, they were kind of in command of the game. And from that point on, they had 2, not 1, but 2 90-yard touchdown drives. And defensively, I mean, people will say, well, they only gave up 17 points. Yeah, but you can't give up 90-yard drives twice in a game. Right. Your defense somewhere in there has to make a play. I mean, it has to make a play to kind of turn things around, and they weren't able to do that.
Because what they're doing right now is that they're forcing the offense to always go 75-80.
Right.
Because they're not shortening the field up at all, and it would probably help Jalen Hurts if they did shorten up the field a little bit. And then Nick Sirianni could be even more creative, because they couldn't get the ball to the wide receivers last week, could they?
No, and that's an area that when the coaches sit down and do the quality control thing and look back at the film, I mean, they got to say, well, wait a minute, we didn't throw a single ball into the middle of the field, and that's you can't do that, and the offensive coordinator was talking. He had a presser the other day, and somebody asked him about that, and they said, "Well, we're kind of just taking what the defense gives us, and we felt like with the better throws were those from the hash marks to the sidelines. Well, if that's not the way things work in the NFL these days. I mean, you gotta, it's a league of crosses and digs and bunch formations and hooks, and especially with a young quarterback, he's got to be able to work the middle of the field. You can't just be throwing balls at the sideline all the time. And I think they realize that. I think the coaches, when they look back at it, said, no, we should have, especially when you're going up against a 49ers team that doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of weaknesses, but their weaknesses in the secondary. I mean, I think that, especially when you have, and you mentioned them, I mean, they have some pretty good receivers, especially Smith, who I think is terrific. I mean, you have opportunities. I mean, you run those guys in a bunch formation. And they come off the ball. I mean, you're going to have 2-3 guys open all the time, and those are plays you got to make in the middle of the field. They're easy reads for the young quarterback. I think it's one of those things when they look back on it, they have to be smacking their head and saying, we really got to do a better job with that. And I think you do, and you have to do it starting Monday night.
Yeah. Micah Parsons, obviously a player that I would be obviously extremely familiar with.
Sure.
What kind of impact do you think he's made for Dallas so far? Because it also looked like they were taking Micah and they were using him at times as a stand-up defensive end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the game against the Chargers, he basically was a defensive end.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was by necessity because Randy Gregory was on the COVID list, and DeMarcus Lawrence is out with the broken foot. So, and if you saw them through the first couple games, I mean, they couldn't get any pass rush going. Didn't seem like. I mean, Tom Brady threw the ball 50 times and they never touched him. Exactly. So they felt like, well, okay, we got to find some way to get a pass rush. So they turned Mike into a defensive end. I mean, just a pure pass rushing defensive end, and he was really good. I mean, he was a game changer. I mean, he had, I think, I've seen different tallies about, he had eight hurries, somebody had 10 hurries, somebody had 12 hurries. But the one thing you can't dispute is he had a huge sack that killed one big drive late in the game, kind of saved the game, and he was in Justin Herbert's face all day. No, he's really good. He's really good, Steve. I mean, I'm not breaking any news to you. I mean, you saw the guy play, but I mean, he's a dynamic defensive player. And the only question is, what's Dan Quinn want to do with him from week to week? I mean, could you make him a defensive end? I mean, a stand-up defense. You probably could. Probably could. I mean, you could do a lot of different things with him. Gregory's coming back this week, so it may not be the need to put him as a pure pass rushing end this week. But maybe they'll decide he was so good that's what they want to keep him at. I'm just guessing, but it wouldn't surprise me if, given the way Hurts plays and the way the Eagles play him, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they have Parsons back sort of in the middle, spying on Hurts, because there aren't too many people that can run with Hurts. If you're going to spy him, you can only spy him with somebody that can run with him, and Parsons can do that. So I have a feeling you might see him in the middle playing the spy role, and if I were Quinn, I think that's the way I would go. Yeah,
Mike is a 4.39. So, I mean, there aren't many guys at linebacker running 4.39, so he can run with him. Also, what about Landon Dickerson getting into the line? Because Brandon Brooks got hurt. I mean, right. I feel awful for Brooks because, I mean, he's been hit with so many injuries. So where's the state of this offensive line right now?
Well, that's it. They got everybody else is healthy, but yeah, losing Brooks was a big loss. I mean, it was one of those things. I mean, they were kind of holding their breath on him all year because he's had. I mean, for 3 years now, it's been one thing after another, and you're kind of, and he's over 30, and I mean, you were kind of. It was almost wishful thinking that you're going to go into the season and expect to get 16 games out or 17 games out of him. Probably wasn't going to happen. But you certainly didn't think you'd lose him in week 2. But that's what happened. And that's a blow. I mean, he's really good. I mean, that right side, when they have him and Johnson playing next to each other, that's formidable. When you got those two guys plus Kelsey at center, I mean, that's a really good offensive line. Landon Dickerson, who was the kid they drafted in the second round from Alabama, who has his own injury history, he came in and he played right guard, and he did okay. I think that he was hurt. He was still rehabbing the injury he had from the end of the Alabama season. He was still rehabbing that, so basically didn't do anything during the preseason, didn't play at all. and really only got back to practicing like 2 weeks ago. So to kind of get thrown in there in week 2, I don't know that he was exactly ready to play. But I mean, he went in there and did okay. I mean, he's not Brooks certainly, but he went in there and played. And the big story on the offensive line, and he's the big story in many ways, is Jordan Mailata, the left tackle.
Yeah.
The 370-pound Australian rugby player that they just signed on a lark. They drafted on a lark a few years ago, who has come in and actually learned how to play this game. And I'll tell you, Steve, right now he's playing really good. I mean, I'll tell you, right now he's the best left tackle in this division. I mean, I think he is. I don't know where he's going to go with this, but he has played that well, and they just signed him to a new long-term contract, so they obviously believe in it. He's quite a story, and he's gone from being a novelty act and like a funny kind of sidebar story to being a legit left tackle in the NFL.
What a story! Incredible. Ray, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your valuable time. We greatly appreciate it and appreciate you.
No, my pleasure, Steve. Anytime. Take care.